Well, good morning. This is Friday, May the 7th, 2021. Looks like it might be a mixed day of weather up here on Wells Mountain in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania. I hope the sun will come out in your area, wherever you might be listening to. We're continuing the series on Ecclesiastes, Learning the Right Time to Act is what I've entitled it. And today we come to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and that should be verse 3, part B. Verse 3, part B. A time to tear down and a time to build up. Now, we're talking about, in a general sense, if I can give a word illustration here, we're talking about construction. Think of the tearing down and removal of the aftermath of a hurricane or a tornado before they're able to build up again. The massive tear down and removal of rubble from 9/11 before they were able to construct the new monument and memorial in that area. That's kind of the idea. But as I researched this, I found it interesting that Solomon is writing this. Solomon is a king over Israel. Solomon knows the history of Israel, and Solomon, I'm sure, has been taught and is familiar with many, many references that Jehovah spoke to Israel about tearing down. And it's an interesting study because all of the Old Testament references, from what I was able to examine, have to do with idols. Exodus 34:13, but rather you are to tear down their altars and smash their memorial stones and cut down their Asherim. That's referring to the children of Israel coming out of slavery, about to enter into the new land. And this is an instruction God gives to them. Again in Deuteronomy 7:5. But this is what you shall do to them. You shall tear down their altars, smash their memorial stones, cut down their Asherim to pieces, and burn their carved images in the fire. Now, as the new generation gets ready to go in, because the old one disobeyed God at Kadesh Barnea in Numbers 14, and Judges 2, God reiterates, and as for you, you shall not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed me. What is this thing that you have done? So if we don't tear down, we are disobeying God. Judges 6:25, this was a test God gave to Gideon. Now, on the same night, the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and a second bull 7 years old, and tear down the altar of Baal which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherim that is beside it. So all the references, and I think there's about 73 in the Old Testament, are referring to tearing down idols. An idol is something that is erected to replace God, something that a person, or the Jews in particular, felt they could not see Jehovah, although they experienced him in mighty ways. They wanted something tangible. And so they turned to the culture of the Canaanite gods and built altars to them for sacrifices. And God repeatedly told them directly and through the prophets that he raised up, and even one or two righteous kings, tear down the idols. The opposite then is to build up. In 1 Chronicles 21:18, then the anger of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David, that David was to go and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. So when we see building up in the Old Testament, it's usually about the construction of an altar dedicated to the worship and public obedience to the Lord. In Proverbs 14:1, in reference to a lady, the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. So women are, if they're married, are to build up their house. In First Chronicles 21:18, then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say, I read that one, I'm sorry, First Thessalonians 5:10-12, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you also are doing. So within the Christian community, we are to be building up. Isaiah chapter 57, verse 14 says, and it will be said, build up, prepare the way, remove every obstacle from the way of my people. And then in Acts 20, verse 32, and now I entrust you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all those who are sanctified. So the building up is around God, around his word, God's people. Tearing down is those things that we erect that take the place of godly relationships. So there's a time to tear down, and you and I will know that time to tear down because the Spirit of God living inside of every believer will put his finger on something in our life saying, this is a competitor to God. Continuing to allow this to replace your allegiance and affection and attention to the one true God is going to provoke him to jealousy. Rather, you should build up. In order to build up yourself in the most holy faith, in order for you to build up someone else, in order to build up, if you please, your ministry and fulfill your responsibilities, you have to remove those things that are drawing your time, energy, and emotion away from what God wants you to do. Monday, when we get back together again, we'll continue this series on a time to weep and a time to laugh. Trust that you will be in church on Sunday, that you will encourage one another, that you will build up one another as you gather together, and especially on this day that has been set aside for the honoring of mothers. God bless.